So how many doors do you guys usually hit in like one shift?
Well, now they went up to 80
I
doors.
probably slowed you down.
Post-political reporter Hannah Knowles has been spending a lot of time in North Carolina. It's a state swarming with organizers supporting both Democrats and Republicans.
I went out door knocking with some organizers with a labor union, and we were out in Charlotte, which is this, one of the kind of blue bastions in North Carolina. And so we were in kind of a quiet neighborhood, like a cul-de-sac, and you had Democratic organizers literally like running into each other.
Cool. Yeah, great to meet you. It's going to take all of us, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But we're going to make history. We're going to turn North Carolina blue.
I hope so, because we need it. I live in Georgia.
And also, as we were going around, we could see that Republicans had already left mailers in some of these mailboxes. So it was clear that both sides are out on the ground in full force.
For Hannah, North Carolina is the place to be because the presidential race there got a lot more interesting this summer after President Joe Biden dropped out.
When Biden was running against Trump, there was this sense that Trump still had the edge. But now that it's Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee, it really is a really tight neck-and-neck race.
Former President Donald Trump is counting on winning North Carolina.
Trump, needs this state for most of his most plausible paths to victory in the Electoral College. This is really one that he has to win. If he doesn't, it's much, much harder for him to get there.
But for Democrats, North Carolina is the one that got away. Of all the states Biden lost in 2020, he lost North Carolina by the smallest margin, just over 1%. To be clear, it's still anyone's guess whether North Carolina will turn blue this November. But in the last week or so, Democrats got another favorable turn of events.
The Trump campaign reeling tonight after a stunning report from our own K-File, which reveals the Trump-backed candidate for governor in North Carolina, Mark Robinson, has made dozens of disturbing and damning comments on a porn website.
Mark Robinson is the Republican nominee for governor in North Carolina. And some Republicans had tried to warn their party for a long time, like, hey, this guy could just implode. Like, we feel like his record is so inflammatory. And now it's really blowing up in Republicans' faces. And there is worry that this could be the tipping point in a state where, Trump is already neck and neck with Harris.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Elahe Izadi. It's Thursday, September 26th. Today, Hannah takes us to North Carolina, a newly competitive swing state. We'll hear how both parties are duking it out on the ground, because who wins here could decide the election. So, Hannah, I know that you have spent a lot of time in North Carolina recently covering the campaign there. You're there right now. You've driven all over the state. Just can you tell me how close is the presidential race there right now?
So North Carolina was the state where Trump won most narrowly in 2020. And so, it really is the one state where Democrats feel like they can actually flip things this year and go on offensive. And so after Harris became the nominee, you immediately saw some of the polling shifting, and you also saw Cook Political Report, which is this nonpartisan elections analyst, moved its assessment of North Carolina from lean Republican to toss-up in the presidential race. A number of polls have showed Harris and Trump basically tied. And that is an improvement from where Biden was running in the state. And so it really has tightened up. Some Republicans have also told us they feel like the state is trending away from Trump. He still has a very good shot there, and Republicans have won repeatedly in federal races in recent years. But there's this sense that maybe it is slipping away and they really need to invest resources and time there.
Is it unusual for the presidential race to be this close in North Carolina? Because I feel like I've often heard it described as a swing state or a purple state, but hasn't it mostly gone Republican in presidential races?
Yeah, it's sort of the white whale for Democrats, or they talk about it as like a Lucy in the football situation for them, where
so many analogies.
They think, yeah, many analogies. It's basically gone Republican at the presidential level for decades, except for 2008 when it went blue for Barack Obama. And so, Democrats certainly feel like the underdogs there. But again, when you look at polling, they clearly have a really good shot right now.
So what is it about North Carolina that has Democrats feeling like, hey, maybe we could win this state this year?
North Carolina is this state that is rapidly growing. It's a diverse state. It has a large Black population of more than 20%. It has a large millennial, younger population, people moving in from out of state. And so it resembles some other places that have trended in Democrats' direction. But again, it's just been a little bit out of reach for them. And it is still this Bible Belt state, kind of a more conservative rural population. And so they have to think about how do we not just do really well in these growing urban centers, but also, how do we compete in those areas too?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, as you said before, this is a state that's just going to be really important. If we were to just pull out the map, can you describe to me why a North Carolina win would be important for each of the presidential campaigns?
When Trump's team talks about their path to victory in the Electoral College, the simplest one is they only need to flip two states that they didn't win in 2020, Georgia and Pennsylvania. And that gets them over the top, but only if they hold North Carolina, which they had won in 2020.
We've won North Carolina twice, and we got to win it one more time. And we win North Carolina, we're going all the way. Perhaps we go all the way anyway, but this is a very important place, a very important state, and I love it.
And so North Carolina is sort of this bedrock of the quote unquote red wall of Trump's path when he thinks about those battleground states. And when you talk to operatives on both sides, they say, if Trump is losing North Carolina, things are probably looking pretty bad for him.
We've won this state every election. The primaries we've won the general elections. And we got one more left before we make America great again. We have to do it again. We have to do it again.
And on the Democratic side, North Carolina, I think, is a bit more of a luxury for them. And they've been more focused on other paths like the so-called blue wall, which is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But if they were able to get North Carolina, that opens up other paths for them as well.
So yeah, clearly the stakes are so high here. And I want to now learn a little bit more about how each of the campaigns are trying to win this race. So let's first start with Republicans. What does that look like on the ground for them? What are Republicans doing on the ground in North Carolina to try to win the race for Trump?
So Trump's campaign has made this really interesting decision to outsource a lot of their on-the-ground field work to these outside groups, super PACs that can take in unlimited donations. And on the one hand, that helps you, rake in all this money that you can then direct toward fieldwork. But there's also some complications when you leave this stuff to an outside group and just kind of count on those groups doing the job you would want them to do. Elon Musk is involved in the creation of one of these super PACs that's pouring money into North Carolina and other states. That's a great help to Trump, but also some Republicans are a little bit skeptical about, will this really get out the vote in the way that we need to?
And what about Trump himself? What has he been doing in the state?
Trump's been coming to North Carolina a lot, so you can see the importance that his team has placed on it. We're about 40 minutes out from when Trump is supposed to take the stage here in Wilmington. This weekend, he was in Wilmington for a rally, and it's really hot and sunny out at his rally. The lines are super long to get in. The lines at the concession stands are super long. A testament to how many of his fans are willing to just sit out there for hours in the sun to hear from him.
Oh, what a crowd this is. That's a big, beautiful. We flew over it. I said, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
Republicans mostly want to talk about the economy and the border in North Carolina, and they think those are the issues that are going to win them the race. Those are the issues where they have an advantage. Trump, of course, diverts often to his own topics that he wants to talk about, like the 2020 election being stolen, even though it wasn't, and all kinds of stuff. But he did really try to hit on those issues at his rally, especially the border.
When you cast your ballot for Trump this November, it means that America's borders will be instantly secured. Can you believe what they've done?
And like he usually does, Trump made a lot of exaggerations about the border. He made some false statements, and he used really apocalyptic language to talk about this issue.
A vote for Kamala Harris means 40 or 50 million more illegal aliens will invade across our borders, stealing your money, stealing your jobs, stealing your life.
Hannah, how have people in North Carolina been reacting to that message from Trump?
We know from polling that voters generally trust Trump more than Harris on the economy and on the border. And we also have some polling suggesting that Trump may still have an edge in North Carolina. There was a poll the other day that had him up 2 points over Harris. And then when you talk to people on the ground, it is really clear that his message on the economy, on the border, is resonating with a lot of people. One of the people I met at a rally was Connie Whitmer. And I caught her as she was just leaving this event in Wilmington. She's in her 80s. And she talked about those issues as a reason that she's supporting Trump.
Our economy is bad. The border is terrible. I feel sorry for both sides. But the law is the law. They should come in legally.
So, Hannah, you brought up Mark Robinson. And I have to talk about him because I know it's a different race. Mark Robinson, he is currently the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. As you said, he's running for governor this fall on the Republican ticket. And then CNN reported last week that between 2008 and 2012, Robinson posted some inflammatory comments on a porn site messaging board, including calling himself a Black Nazi. We had our episode recently about this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Robinson denies the account, but some of his top campaign staff, as you've been reporting, have quit. So does this incident and all the attention it's bringing to the GOP in North Carolina, does that hurt Trump's chances in the state? What did voters tell you?
That's a big question. I think, Trump is so impervious to so many scandals of his own, making that I think a lot of people wonder, is this something that he just kind of skates over as well? But Republicans are certainly worried about it. It's something they're watching for. There is some concern the state is trending away from Trump. I did talk to voters at Trump's rally about Mark Robinson. And obviously, this is not like a representative pool of voters. These are the hardcore GOP-based voters. These are not the moderate voters who, were already sort of recoiling from Robinson, have recoiled more now. But, a lot of these people dismissed the reporting about Robinson as fake news. And some of them, they kind of said, like, even if he did say this stuff, even if he did say, I'm a Black Nazi and Mein Kampf is a good read, I was sort of astounded at the number of voters who were willing to look past that and just said, it was a long time ago, people changed.
Yeah, did you hear the Robinson news this week, and what did you make of it?
I didn't put much credence in it. We've all done things in our past that we're sorry for. Some of the things are crazy. If we just went on that, we wouldn't be here for Trump, would we? Or any of the others. Let's face it.
That was Bob Judson. He was a Trump rally goer who I asked about the Mark Robinson drama. And, he really just brushed it aside. He did not care about what CNN and other news outlets had reported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes sense that, his argument, well, if we judge what Trump did in the past, then I wouldn't be voting for him. That's a logic there that does track, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it was this great reflection of like the Trump era of politics, right? Where like scandals just don't mean what they used to, right? They don't hold the weight that they used to. And it is so easy for people to kind of brush stuff aside, especially, in the name of kind of partisan loyalty. But even at this rally of like diehard Trump supporters, a lot of really hardcore Republicans, there were some signs that the allegations against Robinson could hurt. And the woman we talked about earlier at the rally, Connie Whitmer, she actually hadn't heard the latest drama around Mark Robinson, and she had sort of expressed reservations about something that he said previously, which was that women get abortions because they can't keep their skirts down. And that had bothered her, but she was willing to look past it, and she felt like, okay, maybe that's just kind of, how he talks. But when I told her, did you know that he's now accused of writing all this stuff? He said, I'm a black Nazi.
Oh, my
goodness. And he said, what else? Oh, and he said he had sex with his wife's sister. So, I don't know, hearing that, what does that make you think?
That disturbs me.
Okay.
From my impression of him when I met him, and it's probably been about 2 or 3 years ago when I met him. And that disturbs me.
That really concerned her. Hearing that, but also knowing what you know about Robinson today and having met him, do you think, I don't know, do you think you can still vote for him?
I'll give it some thought.
Yeah.
I'll give it some thought, because I did not hear that statement.
Mm-hmm. So are Democrats trying to tie this controversy around Mark Robinson to Trump?
Yes, and Democrats have a lot of tape of Trump praising Robinson, appearing with Robinson. They've very much tried to make that connection and make it part of the campaign. Kamala Harris's campaign put out an ad last week highlighting what Trump has said, praising Robinson.
And he's been an unbelievable Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson. I think you're better than Martin Luther King.
Interestingly, it didn't sort of get into the latest stuff, and they've really focused on what Mark Robinson has said about abortion.
It's about killing a child because you aren't responsible enough to keep your skirt down.
And so, they feel like beyond this whole controversy over the last week, there's just a lot to attack Robinson and Trump on policy and areas where they want to tie them together as well.
After the break, Hannah explains what Democrats are doing to try to flip North Carolina, including spending time in places where they aren't very popular. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Lillian Cunningham. I've hosted some of the Washington Post's biggest history podcasts. The very first was Presidential. I wanted to let you know that we're bringing you 2 special episodes of Presidential ahead of November's election, exploring how both candidates stand to make history. The first episode is out right now. Look for Presidential wherever you're listening.
So, Hannah, we talked about the ways Republicans are trying to win North Carolina. I want to talk about the Democrats now. They're seeing these polls get tighter and all these other indicators that the state is more competitive for them, even more so than just a few months ago. So what are the Democrats doing with what looks like a new opportunity for them?
I think Democrats have been investing very heavily in North Carolina from the start. And so they were sort of well positioned to take advantage of the enthusiasm that you see right now for Kamala Harris, right? It's not so much that they are suddenly pouring in more. It's that they've been doing all this groundwork and saying for months and months, we're going to put North Carolina in play. We think it's a top battleground state. And all of a sudden, they have the momentum and they have this infrastructure to capitalize on it.
What does that look like on the ground, what you're describing?
If you're a voter in North Carolina, you're seeing a lot of ads. Republicans and Democrats, last time I checked, they had both spent more than $20 million on ads, at least the ones that are tracked by Ad Impact, this tracking tool we use. They're also getting lots of knocks on their doors. If you're, kind of a lower propensity Democratic voter or, someone that they think is persuadable, there is an all-out effort to go find those people and come back to them multiple times to make sure that they get out.
And then before we were talking about these door canvassers, can you just tell me a little bit more about what that effort looks like?
When I was in North Carolina a few weeks ago, I went out with some Democratic canvassers, and these aren't with the Harris campaign, but they're with a labor group, Unite Here, that's knocking doors for Harris and other Democrats. And right away, we ran into this guy who wasn't even on their target list.
Run me your name one more time. Call. C-A-L-L. Call your mother, call your brother. Here we go.
His name was Lawrence Call, and he described himself as more of an independent voter, but he was registered Republican when I looked him up in the state database. But he actually exemplified the momentum that Democrats are seeing in North Carolina and why you have seen something shift from Biden to Harris, because he was not a fan of Biden.
What about in 2020 when it was Trump and Biden? Do you remember how you voted?
Biden to me is an old man.
Yeah.
We need to get rid of him.
Yeah.
He ain't got any new ideas, not for us.
Yeah.
But he also had reservations about Trump, and so now that Kamala Harris was in the mix, he was really interested in her, and he was actually leaning toward voting for her.
She's got a newer outlook on what she's doing, and she's got a firm set of directives that she wants to follow.
Yeah.
Now, he was...
So that's so interesting to me because this was someone on paper who would not have caught the attention of anyone who's just trying to be very efficient about reaching out to voters who might vote for Kamala Harris. So I guess what does that tell you, Hannah?
I think that this conversation shows that Kamala Harris really does have an opportunity to leave behind that tremendous baggage that Biden had for so many voters. And, there are a lot of people who might not be, a traditional Democrat who are giving her a chance, and she really has the chance to define herself to them. Like, voters have sort of been screaming for like a year before Biden dropped out, oh my God, like, we want options besides these two old men who ran against each other in 2020. They just wanted someone different. And so I think now that Democrats have been the party to say, we are going to bring in someone fresher and younger and newer, that's appealing to a lot of people, even if Republicans still feel like they have a lot to work with in terms of attacking Harris's policies and tying her to Biden.
What is the Harris message in North Carolina? How is she trying to win over voters there?
Kamala Harris is definitely talking about abortion, which is this huge issue for Democrats everywhere, and it's salient in North Carolina too because their law has changed since Roe v. Wade fell. They have a ban on the procedure after about 12 weeks of pregnancy, and so they're hoping that can motivate their voters. But they also know that this is kind of a more socially conservative state, and the top issues, according to both Republicans and Democrats, are the economy. And so they know that they need to have an economic message as well.
Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency, because I strongly believe when the middle class is strong, America is strong.
And so Harris has really been trying to talk about economic opportunity, and she gave her first big policy speech in Raleigh right before the Democratic National Convention, and she talked about economic issues there.
We must defend basic principles, such as your salary should be enough to provide you and your family with a good quality of life. Such as no child should have to grow up in poverty.
So, Hannah, you had spent this time in Charlotte, North Carolina, that's one of the state's biggest cities. So I'm assuming the big cities in North Carolina tend to vote more for Democrats. But what about more rural areas of North Carolina? Are Democrats even bothering to go there to try to win over voters?
Democrats are absolutely trying to turn out their voters and persuade voters in rural areas because they know that even if they're probably going to lose those like rural counties, this is 40% of North Carolina, right? Like they need to compete there. It's just a big part of the population. And, there also is a good amount of like diversity in some of these rural areas. It's not like these are all like white Trump voters out there. And they just feel like, if we put in the time and effort to reach those people and make sure they know like they are important to our coalition too, that can really pay off.
Mm.
One of the events that I went to was in Robeson County in this more rural area, and Jamie Harrison, the chair of the DNC, went to talk to this gathering of local like community leaders, church leaders, and he and all the other speakers, including this pastor, James Gailliard, really just tried to fire people up.
2,000 years ago, that's right.
And people were excited, like they were on their feet. They were like yelling and shouting their agreement by the end. It was a really high energy event. And they told these people, like, we're not going to rely on turnout in, Charlotte and Raleigh. Like, we need you to help us out too.
It's a road to the White House. It's through North Carolina. Right. But, and this is no disrespect to my folk in Durham, Charlotte, but we're not going to trust y'all to get us over the finish line this time. I believe that if we increase the votes by 15% in the Sand Hills area and in the East, we will win North Carolina. And if we win North Carolina, Kamala Harris is going to the White House.
Yeah, like they're not going to just focus on these like big cities like Durham. It's like when they say Sand Hills area, in the East, like those are rural areas. Hannah, how do you expect the rest of the campaign season to look like in North Carolina? What do you think could be the determining factor here?
I think we've seen the focus on North Carolina increase recently as it has become more competitive. And so I would expect both sides to be pouring a lot of money into this, a lot of attention. I would expect a lot of visits from the candidates to North Carolina. And again, like Democrats have said all along that they really wanted to make North Carolina a priority. But now all of a sudden it's really paying off for them. And I think that Republicans know they're playing defense here a little bit. And they just have to make sure that this doesn't slip away from them and take away that, most likely path to the Electoral College win that they had laid out.
Hannah, thanks so much for joining me and sharing your reporting.
Thanks for having me.
Hannah Knowles is a political reporter for The Post. Before I sign off, I wanted to share some details on a story that I've been following really closely today. The federal indictment of New York City's mayor, Democrat Eric Adams. Prosecutors charged Adams with wire fraud, bribery, and soliciting campaign money from a foreign national. The indictment was unsealed Thursday. It mentioned a Turkish government official seeking to gain influence over Adams. On Wednesday night, the mayor released a video denying wrongdoing.
I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit. If I'm charged, I know I am innocent. I will request an immediate trials so the New Yorkers can hear the truth.
This comes after a bunch of high-profile resignations in the Adams administration. That includes the head of the city's public school system, who's going to retire at the end of the year. Former police commissioner Edward Caban also resigned. Caban's devices were collected by federal authorities for examination. Adams is a retired police captain who was elected as mayor in 2021. But early Thursday morning, his official mayor's residence was searched, and his devices were seized, according to sources who spoke to The Post. And before we go, I've got a recommendation for you. The Washington Post podcast Presidential returns today with the first of 2 special episodes. Host Lillian Cunningham has been looking at how the current presidential candidates could make history. The first new episode focuses on Harris and what has led to this moment. Lillian sits down with Sharon McMahon, the author of the book The Small and the Mighty. You can find the Presidential Podcast wherever you listen. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. Today's show was produced by Laura Benshoff with help from Ariel Plotnick. It was mixed by Sean Carter and edited by Rena Flores. Thanks to Sean Sullivan. I'm Elahe Izadi. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.